Hey everybody, welcome to our live stream. So excited to be here today. We are here at the State of AI. I see everybody chatting in the chat already. Love to hear where everybody is from. So feel free to put it in the comments. This is an open format, so feel free to add all of your different questions and everything like that there. We definitely want to hear all of your thoughts because AI is just moving so fast and it's just such a fun place to be. My name is Tracy. I'm one of your hosts today. I'm with a company called This Labs. I'm joined by Elliot, our CTO here at This Labs, who is going to be moderating and providing some opinions as well. Joined by Ado Kukic. Look, I was like, I'm not going to mess it up. Ado Kukic. Hi, Kukic. You know, this is just like, that's like the stage jitters or whatever that's got to me. Anyways, Ado, so excited to see you. And then Squeaky as well. But, you know, now I'm just all nervous and weird.
All good.
Let's run it back. It's all good.
All good.
I've never messed up anybody's name. So this is the first for me. But anyway, Squeaky is joining us as a principal software engineer at Microsoft. And Ado is joining us as a community manager at Anthropic. So there's a lot of really exciting things here. Hello, Scott from Atlanta. I don't know. It says Cam Vigil, so I don't know. But Denver, we have some from here. Hello, Mihita. We have a few other folks from Atlanta joining us. But yeah, tell us where you're coming from. And again, we'd love to hear what everybody is doing in their lives. So this event is called the State of AI Context Engineering. We do this event every month or so on different topics. So if you're excited about different topics or anything like that, feel free to drop it in the comments. And, you know, a lot of the initial topics that we had are just inspired from conversations we have with people, which is how the internet, AI, tech moves forward, right? Just through more conversations. So I will let Elliot take it from here.
Thanks, Tracy. Hey, everybody. Maybe to just set the stage or get the conversation going. Context engineering, I feel like, is a term that somewhat evolved out of like prompt engineering, which to me feels like a broad topic. And so, like, in setting the stage, why don't we just start in hearing from each of you, or from the whole group? How do we view context engineering or define it for this conversation? I think generally we're talking about software engineers using coding agents to give it a little bit of scoping, but how do you all view it? Like, what's in scope of that term?
Ado, do you want to go first?
Start?
Okay, I'll go fine.
Go ahead.
Decided to talk first, but I kind of define context engineering. I agree with you, Elliot. I think it evolved from, it was a lot of prompt engineering, and then now I'm hearing a lot more about context engineering. For me, I kind of like to think like I break it down to like what, when, how, and where for context. Essentially, just helping the agent understand and helping the agent have all the information that it can work to its best ability. So like what is the information you're providing? When do you think the agent needs to access said information? Right up top, only when required. How much, and I'm pretty sure we'll get into the details of this later on, but how much of the information, too much is or too little. And yeah, and then where to sort of keep all this information. Is this something that's like a one shot, it's gone, or do you want this to persist across sessions, across conversations? So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and to build on top of that, prompt engineering is kind of a subset of the entire context engineering ecosystem, because you can have really good context in markdown files, in your issue tracker, in your database, but still, if you give it the wrong prompt, it's going to maybe not give you the best result, and the vice versa is also true. Like, you can have a really, really great prompt, but if your agents don't have the right context of your repo, of your ecosystem, of what you're trying to do, you're probably going to run into a very similar issue. So they are very, very closely related, and you need both. But yeah, for me, context engineering is having the right data, the right information available for the agent, not necessarily at all time, but just having it available so that your agent can access it when needed. I typically find that when you give the agent the right level of information at the right time, it gives much better code generation, much better responses, and helps you solve your problem much better, as opposed to just giving it too much information or too much context. So it's also knowing what to give it and what not to give it, and when.
Yeah, I think that alludes to probably a lot of our discussion today when we start talking about like how and when. Over the last, I want to say few years, but I guess it's not quite that now. But like over the last 12 to 18 months, I feel like agents have evolved a lot in terms of the features they enable users to have in terms of when things are loaded. We're far past the like always loaded, crack everything into a single prompt type of working. Let's start in more of the beginning phases. Let's say my team is just now getting started with coding agents. Like we've experimented individually, and now we're trying to, like as a team, really integrate agents into our workflows. And let's say we're not in like the best place in terms of documentation as a team. Like we've got maybe a lot of tribal knowledge. I think a lot of teams are that way. What's a good way, or what are recommendations? Like, how do we get started, right? Like we want to see consistent results or reasonably good results from agents. How should we be thinking about this? Like, do we have to solve some huge problem up front? Is there a way to progressively attack the problem? How do we get started? Ado, would you like to take this one?
Sure, I can I can take this one. I think one of the best ways that I always tell people, when trying to adopt AI into their stack is dive in, dip your toes in, and the best way to learn is really to experience these tools firsthand. You can read a bunch of blog posts, you can watch a lot of videos that will share best practices, but I feel like the real power comes from actually deploying these tools and just using them on your code base to see what they're capable of, because the results will more often than not surprise you. And in Claude Code, we have this specific command that you can run on a brand new code base that doesn't have any AI understanding yet, called /init. And what it's going to do is it's going to spin up a bunch of sub-agents that are going to go through your entire code base and kind of explore it, try to understand it, try to figure out, what type of application is this? How do I start it? What are the frameworks? What are the libraries being used? What are the conventions that already exist? And kind of self-document a Claude MD file that's going to give you a really good starting point and insight into what the agent thinks about your specific code base. And then from there, you can kind of look at that doc and figure out, is this right? Is this important? Is this right, along the right lines? And, Cloud Code isn't the only tool that has this. I know Copilot has a similar thing. I know many other AI coding assistants have a way to kind of onboard an AI agent in much the same way you would onboard a human agent, a human developer onto your code base. With AI, it just runs a whole lot faster. So I would say that's a really good starting point. And then, asking it maybe not to make immediate code changes and then not to go in and, fix a bug or implement a feature, but asking it about, what are some areas for improvement? What are you seeing? I think one of the most underrated things that you can do with an AI agent is have it educate you on your code base, or have it educate you about a problem you're trying to solve, as opposed to just having it do it.
That's interesting. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Generally, would you recommend that people just after initting just try to do things and only start modifying like their context configurations after experimentation, or should they look at agents almost like it's like a new team member onboarding and you're just trying to, here's everything you need to know type of situation? Is it more kind of that lean approach?
I would say so. I think, approaching it in that lean fashion and kind of, I think that'll also help you familiarize yourself with what the agent is capable of, and kind of slowly give it more and more control, just like you would a human developer. Like, you wouldn't throw them into the code base day one and be like, hey, ship this feature. You'd let them navigate around, play around with it, ask questions, and then maybe, fix a small bug, make a small improvement, And as the agent understands more and more of your code base, as you get more and more familiar with its capabilities, I think you'll learn much better how to, where the agent is going to excel, where it's going to struggle, and what gaps you need to fill in between.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can just add on to everything that Ado just shared, I agree completely. Using the /init commands is a great way to start. We also just published a tool called Agent RC, which can also go in and it takes it to a little bit of a next level. Same thing, it'll fire up a couple of sub agents and even look through and suggest, here's an encoding agent, here's a skill maybe that can help from what the tool sees in your repo right now. So if you want like another next level, I would suggest checking out our tool called Agent RC. I agree with the fact that there's only so much documentation and stuff you can read. Jumping in hands-on, as and I think I see it like a half and half with enterprises. I have noticed there are some sort of like grounding rules that you must follow. There's coding syntax styles. We must use certain certain like plugins or certain NuGet packages, certain npm packages, all that kind of stuff. That's something in my head would anyways live in a central documentation repository somewhere anyway. So if I put that aside, that it's sort of already living in this repository somewhere, outside of that, for sure, you have to jump in. Start playing around, see what the agent knows. Like actually just yesterday I did on a personal project, ask the agent to go through and give me a list of like, hey, what are some like gaps and features and bugs that you see that I have missed out that you think, we can work on. So it was really interesting. It actually went in and found a couple of async awaits I missed. It's like, oh, this database is like, this is going to time out. This is like, you need to fix this over here. So the agents have improved a lot. And I think we should start using it more as a peer and like actually ask it like, hey, what do you think? What do you see? Make some suggestions. Yeah.
I would just comment that I love that you say use it as a peer, because it's so refreshing to sort of move away from treat it like an intern or treat it like your child, which I think is things that, late last year we were trying to say, okay, we're past that now.
It's evolved. I would think it's evolved. I did think it was an intern way back, but I think at this point, just seeing how much it can accomplish, it's amazing. I treat it as a peer now. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love that. Well, Cam asked a question here. He said, is security sacrificed in any way?
It is not. So when you run init, it is it's not going to make any code changes. It's not going to make any suggestions. All it's going to do is try to understand what currently exists in your code base and kind of document it for you and document it for the agent. So I don't see any security things that you'd want to consider or that would expose you to any security vulnerabilities. If anything, it might identify some, but I don't think it would expose you to any new security vulnerabilities.
Yeah, that's right, because you can just open up a CLI instance or VS Code chat, wherever you're using the agents. It run this locally, so it shouldn't involve any external calls of any sort. Yep.
Yeah, I know when we're working with our teams and with clients too, like I think the question potentially hits on an idea of like, who owns the code? And I think we're always very explicit that like the engineer leveraging the agent owns the code. And so in a project, security is a concern on every project, but it varies, right? So I think you've got to make sure that what comes back from a init or any prompt that you're comfortable with, and that's going to vary project to project. There's a lot of different projects out there and a lot of different methodologies on how to use agents, right? And how to review or lightly review or not review at all, depending on what's going on. But certainly, if you're asking a security sacrifice, it's probably a concern of yours. So you need to make sure that those things are enforced. And I think that another part of this is like those, like an agent's MD or a Cloud MD, we don't view it as a generated file. It is like a file that's owned by you and your team. I think there's a lot of mechanisms within agents, right, to assist in editing those files and maintaining those files and keeping them up to date. But like ultimately, like we're talking context engineering, these are like major beachheads for context, right? At least the primary ones are always loaded. And so like curating that over time. And something that was mentioned is like seeing what the model's able to do or what the agent's able to do. Well, that capability changes over time too. So like there's an aspect of like upkeep on these files, because your file from a year ago maybe can be cut down a lot because because agents now can really infer a lot of what would needed to be there a year ago, and that's not automatically managed out of the box. So it really turns into like a journey here of managing documentation as you would in the past, like keeping your documentation up to date, right?
Oh, definitely. And I would, I always tell people, treat your CloudMD or agents.md file as a living, breathing document that you check very, very often. Keep it short, keep it concise, but also like keep it updated as your project evolves, as things, become more important, less important, change, because that file is always sent in every single prompt that you send. So if you have some outdated command or some outdated context in there, then you're polluting every single prompt and making your whole context engineering flow much, much worse. So like if there's one thing you take away from from this panel is go and double check your agents MD file, your CloudMD file, and make sure that it is as up to date as it can be.
It can actually be the detriment of everything you do, which is wild.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like to see like one nice sort of, because like what Ado said, it is a living, breathing document. One nice sort of side effect of that I've seen is you eventually notice patterns, and that big monolith file automatically will start breaking up in this process of just maintaining it. You'll start seeing patterns like, oh, this could be a skill, this could be its own sub agent, it doesn't need to live in this main your instructions, your CloudMD files. So yeah, for sure, definitely treat it like any other code file that needs to be maintained.
Well, Magic Sparkler 6633 had a question. Why is context engineering becoming more important right now than just having a larger context window?
That is a very good question. And, I always think that, giving the model, giving the agent the right context and the right prompt is always going to give you a much better answer faster than just relying on a larger context window. I think, as context windows get larger and, we have some models that support up to 1 million token context window. One, if you're utilizing all of that additional context, you're paying way more money. And two, as you as you fill in more and more context, the quality of the responses is going to degrade slowly over time. The models are getting much, much better at understanding the broader contexts, but it's still not as good as like a fine-grained prompt and giving a fine-grained context. It's kind of taking a sledgehammer when a smaller surgical tool would be much better. So I think context engineering, even in the world where context windows get even larger, I think it's still going to give you much better results than just kind of trying to shove everything in context.
Absolutely. I'm a huge instant gratification fan. So if that context window is really big, it's going to take minutes for it to churn, and I'm expecting answers in seconds now. I'm so spoiled. So having those quick, snippy, just exactly what it needs. Like I don't need to give it the full manual if I know I've asked it to just work on a specific function or some specific subset. So just giving it those exact pages gives me much better result, and also helps me like iterate back and forth with to help fine tune exactly what I want. It definitely doesn't, go out of the way, give me like unnecessary information in there just because I had a big convoluted context window. So I like the small. I'm one of those new session. Every time I start, I'm not trying to keep using the same session. So yeah.
Yeah, we lately see more and more patterns of ways to break up work into many sessions versus like a long running session. I think there's a few different schools of thought here, but there's certainly some people seeing a lot of success in really getting fine grained with breaking things up, and just really trying to stay at the front like third or front 50% of context windows, just from like model performance, like you all are saying. I think there's like there's a deeply technical answer from the developers of models here, probably that is missing from this discussion. But I think I think in the same way of how we would break up work. If we were just handing each other epics and that was as granular as we got, like I think there would be a lot of assumptions being made and such. So really focusing in on specifics is what I find gives us consistently good results from agents. And if there's a million tokens loaded up, I just find like the needle is really buried now. It's a very large haystack. And it would only get larger with larger context windows. I think we all, when we start working with models and agents, I think we all want them to be like the genie in the lamp, right? And it's like a little bit kind of mind reader that we want to have there, and just kind of all knowing. But I think we get into a very like practical engineer type of mindset when we really get experience working with them, and we find the patterns that work well consistently. And that seems to be keeping it small right now. So in lieu of a very technical model-y answer, that's the best I've got.
Well, I know we still have a lot of questions for the panel, but one of the things that I wanted to, and Nick and Fada and Scott are chatting in the chat, so I don't think there's anything I need to surface, but thank you for being so lively. Same thing with Brandon in there. Raphael said about better practices in setting context.md files. Do you see any bad practices that should be avoided, like things you shouldn't add, one large context file versus several small ones, structure, etc.?
That's a good segue into the next question, maybe, if you want, which is like, sure. I think what we often start out with is those primary files, like those always loaded files, right? Like that's, I've been repeating myself in a prompt. How do I handle fixing that? Okay, well, let's go add it to an agent's MD, a Claude MD, and I won't have to repeat myself any longer, right? And I think that's where a lot of people start. And at some point down the road, that file's huge. And you have the situation where it's like, I was doing it a lot, but I'm not really doing it every time. Like last month, I was doing a lot of work in this area of the product, but now I'm over here in this area. So like the things I was saying are never even utilizing over here. And so the thing I thought were all the time are not really all the time, now that some time has passed. And it's getting confused in different ways. So I'm kind of like circled back on myself. The thing I was correcting is now actually needing to be corrected further or something like that. Like, you're shaking your head. So I think this is like a common experience you're seeing. So like, what do you do when you find yourself in this situation? In my thoughts, you start to explore the other mechanisms you have, like the other, like when and how. So maybe Squeaky, share some ways that you're recommending when you find yourself in a situation that, where do you go from here? Because I think this is like a very natural progression. It's totally normal if you're in this situation, but where do you take it from here?
Absolutely. Definitely see these questions, get a lot of these questions. I mean, my first suggestion is always avoid the big monolith sort of Claude MD or Copilot's instructions MD file, because that's that big context that's getting added to every call that's being made, and like every time you talk to, so that's that big dump right up like a header in every call that you make. And my first instinct is always break that down. That doesn't need to be as big. You just want stuff that's like maybe coding standards, maybe like architecture decisions, just like the high level project wide constraints can live in that file. But everything else that's in there, my suggestion is always start breaking it up. So you can move them into conditional instruction files, which you have. You can use the apply tag and scope it to specific files, specific extensions, specific areas of your code base, specific folders, and that way, again, that will significantly shrink that context and that monolith big file up front. There's the new awesome skills that are available, and that's something I highly recommend using because skills come in. These are specialized tasks and they come in on demand. So based on the description of your skill, the agent knows when to pull in the specific skill, and it's not constantly overloading the context with all of it. So I definitely like using that. And and the next thing I like to use is custom agents. That's my favorite thing to do. So having an agent that specializes in what it needs, and the agent itself will know if it needs to call, we also have sub agents available. So if you have custom agents, you can ask it to pull in requirements like, hey, run these on sub agents, use this specific custom agent to do this. So I think, like I said, naturally working through a big instruction files, as you start looking at it, you can automatically see hey, these things, like Elliot just said, I'm not working in the space anymore. It just will start making sense to break these up into different sections. So I think that's definitely one thing I recommend. A cool sort of tool that can help you is what I like to use in VS Code. Specifically, we have this new chat debug view, which essentially, if you open that up, you can look at your whole, every time, when you send a request, you can look in and see what the exact, how did it sort of structure instructions, what did it send, what did it not send, how much context you use. It breaks all that down for you. So if you are curious just to know that how is my instruction file too big, is it too small, what exactly is being sent to the LLM, using the chat debug view is another way I've seen a lot of enterprises fine tune these files and see what needs to live in a skill versus is it even calling the right skill? Is it calling the right agent? So there's tools available now also that can help you make these decisions.
Ado, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I thought she put it really, really nicely. Break things up as much as you can, avoid the monolith. The way that I always try to frame it when talking to kind of new developers that are just getting onboarded to kind of expanding their agentic workflows and toolkits. Think of your CloudMD, think of your agents.md file as your project's constitution, right? It should be very short, as short as possible, just to highlight the kind of foundational rules of your application stack. So your coding style, your band patterns, your testing requirements, things like that. But think of using skills as more of task-specific workflows, if you will. So rather than explaining in the CloudMD file how to do something, when you want to give, when you have a repeatable workflow that you have well documented, that your team has applied over and over again, make that into a skill, or even better, create a sub agent and give them access to that skill, so that when it comes to building a UI component or doing a security audit or review, you have the specific skills that have that additional context and additional workflow logic that you otherwise might include in a CloudMD file, or might try to include in your prompt every single time. If you make it a skill, it's reusable, it's loaded on demand, it doesn't consume a ton of your context window, because the skills only get their metadata sent until the skill is invoked and actually used, and then the rest of the data is loaded. I myself am a big fan of, like Swiki said, using sub agents and using multiple agents for specialized tasks, just because the sub agents also get their own context window. So if you have a dedicated, sub agent that does front-end UI work, and then you have a dedicated sub agent that does, that's only focused on writing your SQL queries or working with the database, they're gonna, every time they get spun up, they're gonna have a clear context window. They're gonna have information from the main agent on what they're trying to achieve, and they'll have their set of skills, their set of instructions, and typically be able to do a much better job much faster, as opposed to kind of stuffing everything into a single agent and having it do all the things kind of all at once.
That's a great point on the sub agents. I think you've got something up here on the screen. Do you want to talk about, Tracy?
Yes. Yeah, I did want to share really quickly, because this is actually inspiring me to think about what other workshops we can offer. We do have a workshop. It's if you go to ai.this.co, Elliot on the call actually does teach this. So if anybody wants a code, I will be sharing it in the comments later for $50 for this workshop. But a lot of great questions, and I'm like, okay, maybe we should actually do one, because I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all of these questions, but there's so many, Tech Huang, and talking about where to how to structure, or where to put all. Oh, I can't find Linda's There we go. Like where to store the context files, skills MD to do content. There's just so many amazing conversations that are happening right now. So Elliot, I'll let you continue on, but if we want to address any of these, I can pull them up in the screen.
Cool. Yeah. This is like a massive topic overall, right? Like this is kind of like the core of just using agents and interacting with them. So that it is almost endless amounts of topics. But just sticking on the kind of the sub-agent piece for a little bit, I think we can maybe stop for a moment and just talk about kind of protecting context of your conversation, and breaking up work into phases and leveraging sub-agents as a mechanism of kind of like protecting the main thread or like the main conversation that you're trying to have to accomplish something. I think is pretty big. Like just for example, when you pick up a ticket or some change you want to make, one of the early parts of that is kind of exploring the existing code base. What is it doing now? How does it work now? How might it go about this change? And agents are huge at helping educate you, as you said earlier, Ado, on your code base. You may already be familiar, or you may not. You may not have worked in this area of the code in a while, or ever. And so exploration is a huge early part. And I think sub-agents here seem like a big deal for protecting versus like walking right up to your agent and saying, okay, here's my ticket, let's make this change. And then inside of one context window, it's figuring out, well, what's going on now? Okay, now let me make the change. Let me spend some time validating the change. All those tasks are going to be so compressed and shortened in terms of tokens if you're doing this all in one window versus like using the features now, like explore agents and things like that hand off to a sub-agent. And then all the legwork of figuring out what's there, reading, multitude of files is left in the context window of the sub-agent, right? And then what comes back are the important bits to the main thread. So I guess just plus oneing on sub-agents as a mechanism to really preserve your context in the long run. And I think that arcs back to the larger context window question here too. I think it's more of a user land solution, I guess, in terms of sub-agents. But there's some clear patterns there because in that research, there's a lot along the way that was not useful information, right? You had to explore it to figure out if it was useful, but in the end, it wasn't useful. So you actually want to be rid of it. And so that mechanism works really well versus carrying it forward. It really mirrors how we would work traditionally too. Like we're going to report on things and save the things off that were meaningful, but we probably looked at a lot of stuff that we just continued on from.
Yeah.
So agent skills have been mentioned a few times. This is like a huge topic, I think, with everybody right now. And it somewhat seems like they're the one-stop shop. It's like the de facto thing for managing context now between like the on-demand nature of them and things like that, right? Like, is any information needed all the time? Is it probably hard to say truly yes to. So like the on-demand mechanisms of skills seem really attractive from like a scaling context type of situation. Are skills really, the one-stop shop in your all's minds, or is there a little bit of like everything's a nail and we've got a hammer finally going on? Like, are there maybe a good question is like, have you run into situations where skills are being misused, or that you wouldn't recommend skills are used for, and what would you recommend instead in those cases? Just how do you put skills into context of all the other features you have available?
Ado, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. I think, skills have only been around for a couple of months now. I think we released them not even like 2 months ago. And they've taken the world kind of by storm just because of their portability. We made agent skills an open standard from the get-go. I think like a few weeks after we released the standard, we said, hey, this is too good to just be limited to Claude. We would love everybody to be able to benefit from this. And really like the magic of skills, I would say, isn't anything like necessarily operational, or there's not a ton of technology involved. It's really just markdown files, right? It's simple instructions that give Claude, that give ChatGPT, that give whatever LLM model you're using, the proper workflow for what you want accomplished. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've seen so much adoption is that, one, they are very easy to create, and you can actually use LLMs to create and debug and test and verify and improve your skills as well. So it's like, if you're typing a prompt over and over again, or if you have a workflow that you find yourself using over and over again, you can just explain it and be like, hey, I am doing this thing every single time. Can we make it into a skill so that I don't have to keep explaining and giving it context and telling you how to do it? But with that said, Elliot, I think you brought up a good question on like skill abuse and like
Yeah.
our skills, the the solution to everything. I don't think that they're the solution to everything just yet. I think, as the standard evolves, as we get more and more adoption and, more unique use cases for skills, I think, we'll definitely find the happy place where we can confidently say like skills for these use cases, for these workflows all the time, no questions asked. But for these other use cases, maybe an MCP server might make more sense because you'll have more programmatic control over the tools, better access to the APIs and maybe like just more control and more capability. And I think like one of the things I really like about the skill standard, and I was talking to the folks over at Anthropic that are spending a ton of time on this, like they explicitly do not want to make skills more complicated and add a bunch more complexity to them. So the simpler we can keep skills, the better. And if that means that, there's going to be different building blocks, different components, whether that's MCP or like another standard that comes along for different use cases, I definitely could see that playing out. But skills, I think, have their place in repeatable workflows that help you really move quickly and not have to repeat yourself all the time.
100% plus one to everything you just said. That's all, like that's exactly what I would have answered that question as well. That's the same way I think about it. Definitely, as I'm working, like we were talking about earlier, jumping in is the best way to do this. And as you start like playing around, you will start seeing those little repeated loops that you want to move into a skill. You can always ask the agent, like Ado said, make this into a skill. We've been doing this like a few times. There's another tool I wanted to share, which maybe I'll put the link in the chat, but this is one of our coworkers here in Microsoft just created this tool he calls like Sensei. Essentially, he made this to help you if you've made a skill file and you're like, hey, is this a good quality skill? Is it a bad quality skill? Is there some improvements to it? He built this tool to help, you can sort of analyze and you can work with it and improve the quality of your skill, if you may. Another thing I like doing with not just my skills file, I do this with like, MCP servers or even just my instruction file as such as I kind of like to make the models sort of do a little battle against each other and evaluate the quality of it and give me like, like, hey, this is like, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. The simplest one that I like to use is just like, I give it a prompt and an expected answer and ask it to go and evaluate my current set of skills and instructions to see if it's expected answer, it's not meeting the answer, create a grading scale for it. So that's another fun way. Again, you're still forcing yourself to use these tools, get more comfortable with it and use them to help you evaluate what you have.
What about this idea of not using skills? So if you're a beginner and you're sort of reaching and, you've decided that you should be using all the skills and you just have gone skill crazy, right? Do you think that sort of eats away at the foundation of understanding like how to use the agents at all?
So the way that I like to explain it to people, like when it comes to building agentic workflows, is you can almost think about it as like you would use Visual Studio Code, right? Like if you just download it and open it up and load in your code base, you get so much out of the box and you can go so far with just plain vanilla VS Code setup, right? But the real joy comes from customizing and downloading the different plugins, really making it your own, to tailor it to your workflows, to tailor it to the languages that you work in, the tools that help you really kind of elevate your workflow. So just like with VS Code, like you could get 95% of the way there with just a vanilla setup. The real joy and the real like flexibility comes in adding these additional components that the community has built, that other people have released and made available. And I think agentic workflows are much like that. You can use Claude Code directly, vanilla, without any plugins, without any skills, without any sub-agents, and go so far. You can learn so much. It'll do pretty much anything and everything you want it to do. But when it comes to really tailoring it to suit your workflow, to suit your applications, to really like take you to the next level, that's when you start introducing skills, hooks, custom sub agents and things like that. So yeah, I think, you definitely don't have to jump in and do all the things. I would say take it at your own pace with whatever you're comfortable with. And as you start finding opportunities to like optimize and make your workflow better, then start introducing, see like, does it actually work? Is it actually making it more joyful for me to use this app? Is it helping me accomplish more? And if not, get rid of it. And if it is, like double down. That's kind of how I see it.
It feels like it all kind of starts with prompt engineering, right? Like once you are putting everything in the prompt and it's not off in a different file and things like that, you gain a confidence that like the way you're prompting, the specifics, the way you're communicating the things you need is being successful. Then I feel like you gain some confidence to, okay, I don't need to be so verbose here. I notice that I'm repeating this often. Like, how do I abstract that out? Because if you start there, you have a lot less visibility into what's going on, especially if you're not as comfortable yet, right? Like going from something being explicit in a prompt to something being dynamically loaded at the agent's decision is going to get you into a lot more of a situation where, unless you're looking in the details of the logs and things like that, you may not be aware of whether that is even in the context or not. So if you're not getting the results you want, you're going to have a little bit of a more effort to try to figure out what is really happening. So it seems like, starting at the beginning of the journey and just focusing on the prompts. If you're really early, just focusing on the prompts. And I think you can potentially get into a similar situation with skills as people found themselves in with MCPs, right? Like if you have too many loaded, like which skills are applicable to a prompt or to a task can get it confusing. And it may not load the right one, or it may choose a different one. And so, nothing. I think we all know that nothing's deterministic with these tools. But I think you want to have some confidence in which skill is going to be selected for most tasks. Otherwise, you're leaving like a lot to chance in that automatically on-demand mode.
Yeah. I mean, I also agree with what Ado said right at the beginning. Starting lean is where you want to go. There's no like, you don't have to overload anything at the beginning. Start super lean, like the init file that Claude generates for you or Copilot chat generates for you. That's enough. That's a great starting point. And then, figure out what you need for your specific code base.
Something I love about this space is almost everything's markdown and almost everything's open source. And so even if you're not using those, a certain skill or a certain plugin directly, you often can go introspect into the prompting that's inside of that. And that may teach you something about your prompts or something to try differently. Like it's just a great way to learn, even if you're not consuming those skills right away. I mean, I feel like when I look out at a lot of the skill marketplaces and things like that, they're essentially tools that have worked well for, a team or a few teams or something like that. They may not work well for everybody, but like it's still like a great place to learn on what's working for others and consider how you change what you're doing. I think that's another win from an open source perspective. I think all these things are plain text and out there to take a look at what each of those are doing.
For sure.
Speaking a little bit more on MCPs, just mentioned the challenge sometimes with MCPs if you have too many loaded. For context. Now, I know the agents, I think, have evolved a little bit to not auto-load all MCPs, and they kind of have a little bit of an on-demand nature now to try to kind of push that problem out a little bit or let it scale a little bit further before it's truly an issue. But I think like on the back of that challenge, we are seeing like a lot of teams shifting, especially with the introduction of skills and this. The skills, I think, highlight more of the opportunity to pair prompts with scripts and things like that. And I think that's started to offer like an alternate path to MCPs, or maybe like what's viewed as like a maturation path, where like MCPs might be used to prototype a workflow, but then someone might write a skill that hits an API directly with a script. Like let's say my workflow goes to GitHub to get ticket information, and I use a few different options. In this case, actually, there's a CLI that already exists. There's an MCP. And so we're seeing a number of teams introduce skills or prompts or CLIs and scripts that are more targeted to like the exact tool call. It's not really a tool call in that case anymore, but like the exact bit of information that is wanted from that workflow. I assume you all are aware of this. So I'm just curious what are your thoughts on how this will play out long term? Like, is this a risk for MCP long term? Is this are we in a period where the MCP standard and tooling will just continue to evolve, and long term we see everybody using MCPs, or do you think this might be more of in the end something that people use to prototype workflows, or when they're on demand in like a one-off workflow, the MCP is always better. But if you're doing something very repeatedly, you might try to create a more deterministic focused script to protect context in the long run. Swiki, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was like, as you were asking the question, I was just remembering some conversations we had with some enterprises, and I see this question actually come up a lot in enterprise settings and I think advantage of using the MCPs stand out a little bit in some, like the examples I can think of right now in enterprises are really good, because for things like you just said, like issue tracking, APIs, internal internal wikis, internal APIs. To me, I think an MCP is a good use case for that. Centrally managed, you have to update it in one spot. You don't have to go through every repo in your organization updating each skill. So in that space, my gut instinct would be, hey, this is something an MCP is excellent for. And just going back to what you said, even for prototyping, if you have your organization standards, use these databases, use these connectors and all that kind of stuff. So when someone is prototyping within your organization, having that MCP to help you with the prototyping is great. And I think that's a great use case for MCPs. And that's why I don't fully see MCPs going away, but I think as we were talking about, evolving from an intern to a peer, I think MCPs and skills are going to constantly keep evolving the more we use it. But I would think, especially in an enterprise situation, like MCPs are a powerful tool to keep around. And skills, like you said, deterministic, they will still have their space. It could be something specific to, like, you have the organization MCP, and then each team has their own skills for the specific way they want to maybe run a CI/CD pipeline or things like that, or they like to do smoke tests in this particular order or something. So I can see them both existing. But when you first ask me, like, what lives where, to me, MCPs goes to enterprises, and I see a lot of value in that specific use case for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say like one big difference in the way like to think or frame the difference between like MCPs versus skills is, MCP servers really are a way to connect to tools and services, whereas skills are much more focused with encoding kind of repeatable workflows or knowledge around how to use specific tools, which could include MCP servers as well. I think that the big point there is like authentication as well, right? With like MCP, we have kind of an authentication story. We can host remote MCP servers that evolve their tools over time, whereas like you wouldn't necessarily want to save your API keys to your database, for example, or to your log system, or any sort of external service that requires authentication. You necessarily wouldn't want to make that into a skill and put it in like a script file. I think Swiki's point on updatability as well, like when you make an update to an MCP server, you can push it and everybody gets the update at the same time. Whereas with the skill, it's much more complicated. Like, did you go in and pull the skill from a specific marketplace? Was it from your organization's account? Is it loaded in the proper directory? Is it in your global namespace? skills can get very out of hand very quickly. Whereas I feel like treating MCPs as a way to connect to tools and services external to your code base, and skills as a way to like help you understand and give the workflows on how to use those tools, I think is the right framing for now. Now, could this evolve over the next 3, 6, 9 months? Definitely, and I'm sure it will. But I think today, like that's the right way to think about it.
Very helpful. I'm
Yeah, for
curious.
sure. Yeah.
I'm curious to get your all's thoughts on compaction. I think there's a few different things here, but like in terms of managing context, how do you all view compaction, and how should people leverage that? Sweeky, you mentioned earlier that like you're kind of a habitual new conversation, new session type of person. So I assume when I hear that like you're probably not leveraging compaction too often in agents. Like, but I think we'll often hear people talking about agents running for many, many hours within a similar session and things. So like likely that's involved in some way there.
Yeah.
There's a few
Yeah, I
different
know.
viewpoints, but
Yeah, I guess I should put a caveat to I do a new session every time. I do love using the plan mode first when I'm like working on a new feature. That's my favorite thing to do. And yes, when I'm planning something, it's a lot more verbose. It's a lot more back and forth. Because it essentially, I'm making sort of like a product design document, right? So, but with that, I do hit those big contexts I was in. Yeah. To me, it's like I have the auto compaction stuff always turned on, like, and I think that's worked pretty okay for me. But there's like the new agentic memories features that have been coming in across all the products have been something super interesting to me, and I am starting to leverage that a little bit more. Having agentic memory shared between sessions, especially, is super cool. In the Copilot CLI, they just also recently added like you can do a /memory and search specifically through specific sessions if you don't want it to just go kind of like look through all my past sessions situation. And like with the plan, the reason I like the plan mode is maybe indirectly connected to the compaction, but I can plan and create a whole like complete planned document and then switch just that planned document over to a brand new session and start implementing the feature over there. I think that's the kind of flow I like as of now. But yeah, there's like I think I've mentioned this earlier too, but if context windows, like if you are trying to like really track your context windows, your token usage, all the tools now have like ways to track how many tokens are used in your current context. Like I said, in VS Code, you can go look at the chat debug view and see where your context window is at and how big it is. So there are lots of different ways now, I think, to leverage it. Before, we didn't have all this insight. We didn't have any way to check how much context we've used. So maybe today, and I won't say this will last in the future, but as of today, I've kind of switched over to just having auto compaction turned on and then just trying to split my workflows into smaller bits as it makes sense to me. Like I said, I do a plan mode if I have to really talk a lot. And all the other stuff we've been talking about too. We're using subagents, you can also use this fleet now in Copilot CLI that automatically divides up your tasks into subagents and stuff like that. So there's a lot more available today, to help understand what is your compaction issue here. Like, why are you having to constantly compact your conversation? Is there a new, sort of workflow method and new tools you can use for that?
Yeah, for me, I try to avoid compaction and auto compaction as much as possible, just because I found that in my experience, while it does work okay, like I would much rather start fresh. And when I feel like I'm reaching the end of a context session, I'll reevaluate myself and be like, am I trying to do too much in this session? Can I break this down into 2, 3, 5 tasks and run subagent and like just start new sessions and tackle like you do this, you do that, you do that, so that I don't have to compact it? Because I do find more often than not in my experience, like compaction is a little slow. So like I get really annoyed when I get to ask a follow-up question and it's like, oh, let me compact for 2 minutes. So I try to keep my tasks that I give to the LLM as concise as possible and try to do like 1 or 2 things at a time. Once those tasks are done and I'm happy with it, just clear/new and start on the next one. You start with the fresh context window, fresh mind space, and it allows, I try to see the compaction window as few times a day as possible. I know, it is getting better and better, and it's definitely, I've seen some folks just keep one running session all day long, and it just auto compacts and auto compacts, and they're happy with it. They're like, it works for me. Like I don't have to switch. I don't have to re-explain things. My workflow, on the other hand, is very much start as many smaller sessions as possible, so that you don't have to hit the compaction window.
It feels a little bit like, just letting go of the steering wheel when you let it compact, right? Like the whole conversation is so much about engineering the information that the agent has. And like that activity feels a little bit like the opposite of that. Like it's a very useful feature, because what would you have otherwise? Like just a 400 error from the model. So you'd rather have the compaction than that, right? But like under ideal circumstances, like you're still staying in full control and trying to be very intentional about the information, right? So it's I tend to agree. I look at it more as like a safety net, not something as much I want to like utilize. Like this, but it seems like much better mechanisms for how to get a conversation to utilize more tokens or go longer, than being so agentic that the model can just decide what to continue forward with. Yeah.
When will we be there? It sounds like Squeaky's there, and Ado and Elliot are still like,
It's getting better. Like it's an area that continuously improves right now.
Absolutely.
So this could be like a next week thing.
It could be a today later in the day. It's moving so fast.
There's solutions from like user land, but also from like kernel land with the models coming out too, right? Like I think there's compaction features that are happening at the model level. There's improvements that are happening at the agent level, and so like we're working in all directions trying to make it better, I think, right?
For sure.
Well, we talked about like a number of features that are in agents, some recent, some that have been here for a while. But I kind of want to turn it over to each of you for a few minutes to just, what are some things that you're seeing from the ecosystem or your ecosystems that you really want to highlight for the audience to take a further look at, like on their journey of owning and managing their context for their agents? I think pretty open-ended, like just what are some things that you think are important or that you'd like to share that are recent? Ada, would you like to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to recent developments, I think, one of the big things that we focused on the last couple of weeks is making Claude Code available on many more surfaces. And being able to interact with it in kind of more of a hands-off way, like with remote control, you can take your session with you on the go. So if you're stepping away from your computer for a bit, but still want to continue to give it prompts and have stuff ready for you, you can activate remote control. I think, when it comes to workflows, one of the most underrated things, and Squeaky mentioned it, is plan mode. I very, very highly recommend, if you're doing anything that is non-trivial, that's not something that the agent can do in a quick 1 or 2 steps, use plan mode. Get the thinking on paper, get the thinking on Markdown of how you actually want this feature implemented or this bug or issue tackled. Review it with the LLM, and then once you're happy with it, then send it off. I think folks that don't use plan mode will typically see a much larger chance of things kind of going awry, not going the way that they expect it to. But with plan mode, you can kind of capture items and capture issues before it starts making code changes, before it starts making edits to your files. And then one other thing I would add on top of that is ask the LLM follow-up questions. Like Claude Code already, when you give it kind of an ambiguous prompt or a prompt that could be interpreted in multiple different ways, it will pop up and ask you, hey, did you mean to do, I can tackle this 3 different ways. Which one would you like? Option 1, 2, 3, or 4, add your own response. And sometimes, it does a multi, kind of gives you a worksheet with 4 or 5 different questions to really help you hone in on what you're trying to accomplish. But and that is a great first step. And I'll usually go through that in the plan mode. But then I'll also ask a follow-up at the end of like, hey, Claude, is there anything else that we're missing or anything else you would like to know before we dive in and start implementing this plan? And oftentimes it'll still pop up with 2 to 3 really good suggestions or good things for me to think through and be like, do I really want it like this? Do I want it like that? Or no, we don't need this library. It might be overkill. So from a workflow perspective, don't let your skills atrophy by just letting the LLM do everything for you, and ask as many follow-up questions as possible. 1, so that you can learn yourself, and 2, so that you can really get your thoughts out into the LLM as much as possible before it starts making changes. And I think if you do these 2 things, your outputs, your prompt engineering, and everything is just going to go through the roof and help you build much better software faster.
Oh, I love everything you just shared. Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of plan mode, so definitely +1 to that. Yeah, I was going to highlight similar experiences. If you're in plan mode in CLI or inside of VS Code, you get a similar sort of like, definitely build that muscle of like having more of a back and forth discussion, answering that little worksheet, asking it for like some more suggestions. It is really amazing how it comes up with like some really cool bits. It also finds those little security gaps, or it'll be like, this, you might consider, restructuring this, or in the future, it'll think that, oh, maybe this might be a problem if you're trying to scale a problem out. So that's definitely +1 to, using plan mode. It also helps with the compaction situation. You have ready information context, which you can give over to another agent. The stuff I have been using a lot, and some of the cool new features that have come out, I've been trying to change my mindset to more of like a bountiful. I'm trying to like prototype heavy, more delegate more. So things like and /delegate is one of the commands in the Copilot CLI. Essentially, if I look at an issue, for example, a GitHub issue, which looks like it's very well defined, and I'm confident this is something I can just completely hand over to an agent, I'll /delegate and let it sort of handle it on its own, open a PR for me to review later. So that's something I've been trying to do a lot more of. We've got, like I said, the fleet in Copilot CLI. I've been using that quite a bit. I give it a big task or a big plan, and it automatically will figure out, okay, I can break these up into subtasks and fire off sub agents automatically, and then come back to the main thread in the right order that it needs to and finish the task for you. So that's all been like pretty. I've been really liking that a lot in the new stuff that we shipped. This is in preview, but VS Code just sort of introduced this idea of agent plugins, and not to think of them as MCPs, but more like this is a bundle of different customization files. So this could be skills and MCPs and a bunch of other things. So this has just come out in preview, and something very exciting, I think, and I'm excited to like explore this a little bit more. Like, so for right now, I think it like bundles in awesome Copilot as a plugin, which is super cool. It's one of my favorite open source Copilot repos, open source repos to go to get inspiration on skills and prompts and instructions and all that good stuff. Yeah, like I said, I know I said this like a few times, but definitely if you are curious on what's happening behind the scenes, I would recommend checking out the chat debug view. You get an great understanding of like what's going on behind the scenes, like how your prompts are, how the LLM is ingesting your prompts, what it thinks of it. Let me see if there's anything else that I've been like enjoying a lot. I've been trying a lot of stuff, honestly, so many new things every day. It's such a fun space to be in. I mean, I think that's my other recommendation. Be on the cutting edge. If possible, get on the pre-releases, try the experimental features. giving feedback to the product teams on trying all the new features is the best way to improve your quality of life. So definitely try all the new stuff that's coming out.
Great. I think like some a little bit summary of our conversation, but also like some things that just stick out to me as most meaningful in this topic are starting lean, seeing what works out of the box before modifying further, and also keep in mind that what works out of the box changes over time as the agents and models change. So you may every once in a while want to run an experiment where you remove a bunch of things. If you feel like you have a lot of context, you might want to have a little trial of what happens if I just completely delete my AgentsMD and do that same prompt that I just did. Was it just as good? Was it better? And that may be the best way right now to test that every once in a while. But then the other thing is just really echoing the importance of separating planning from implementation or using plan mode, things like that. Like whether, in my opinion, whether it's like a formal plan mode in the agent or just a generic, you go through a planning phase, it feels like just critically important to being effective with agents. This idea that you're like the output of a planning mode or a planning phase is a prompt, a highly enriched, highly specific prompt that you worked on with the agent. Seems to continue to be like the number one unlock to get consistently good results with agents. And then like we talked about a lot of different mechanisms that agents have, and there's new ones all the time. So like I'm always like a read the manual person. I know not everyone is, but I'm big on like you got to go back to the docs of these tools too, because like if you used plan mode, 6 months ago, it's changed. If you use features, there's new ones. So like you're constantly going back and looking at the docs. And then I think if you feel like you're more advanced and you've got a good grasp on these things, I feel like the debug stuff is huge. Like starting to get more familiar with the internals, like go one layer deeper and getting familiar with how things are actually working in the inner workings is just going to make you that much better at how you organize the information, because you're going to better understand how it's being consumed. Whereas like if you're just starting, that may be a little bit daunting, but like if you're feeling comfortable with a lot of things you're talking about, like that's the next thing to be looking at, is looking more into like the agent logs, the agent debug stuff. And then I'm glad you all mentioned plugins at the end. We didn't really have time to talk about it, but I feel like that starts to present an alternative to MCPs as like a multi-repo type of portability, right? Especially when you start to look at like how enterprises utilize agents. You have this kind of organizational layer of things, which was not until recently probably well served. Like MCPs is probably the very best way. And now at least you have some other options with plugins and things like that to make some of these context files, let's call it generically, more portable across repos, versus like you got to put them in your user folder, or IT has to distribute them in some funny black magic way or something like that. Yeah, so I think those are some highlights that I would want everybody to try to walk away with from today. Okay. Well, any closing thoughts, any kind of final tips or tricks? We may have just covered them, but anything else you'd like to add this weeky?
I'm going to steal it from Ado, but just get going. Either if you have an idea, just start prompting and just build something, or if you have an existing repo, just open it up, do /init, and just start using the tools. I mean, there's no reason not to at this point. Like just give it a shot and then build your journey from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Jump in and I think a lot of it might sound intimidating, that there's a lot of different concepts, slash commands, skills, hooks, sub agents. It can get overwhelming very, very quickly, but I would say just take it at your own pace. Just start with the vanilla setup with that, whichever tool you use. Give it a few prompts, get familiar with it, and then introduce slowly, one by one. Okay, I'll build out a skill. Does the skill work better for me or not? Yes, no, okay, great. Then I'll add another skill, and then I'll see a workflow that I keep telling the LLM not to do. So then maybe I'll go and create a pre-commit hook or a pre-prompt hook that blocks some commands, and then I might see that I might have a need for a specialized agent, so I'll go and create one, and so on and so forth. Like, the real joy comes from finding ways to improve your workflow, and things move very, very quickly. So you don't have to be on the bleeding edge all the time. Like, there is so much good stuff out there that there's so many ways to be productive without having to constantly be checking the change log for any new command. I just mentioned one in the chat /batch. So we released 2 commands to kind of help you organize your code bases and make kind of larger migrations easier. One command called /simplify, which is going to look through your recent changes and really simplify that code and get rid of duplication and just make it a whole lot cleaner. And then another one called batch, which kind of sounds a lot like the fleet command that you mentioned, where it's going to break up larger migrations into individual tasks, batch up that work, spin up agents to do it. So just because these 2 commands exist doesn't mean that you can't just prompt the model directly and be like, hey, I have this file. Can you simplify it for me? Like, what are the opportunities to make it cleaner? Or, I'm making this, HTML to React migration. How would you go about it? Let's create a plan together and then spin it off.
Well, amazing. There's again so much more to talk about. I will say that the workshop, again, I did post it in the chat. The code is this.x if you want it for $50. The upcoming workshop is suited for experienced developers who work a lot with AI agents too. We talk a lot about sub-agents and sort of just how to gain the most productivity out of your work. Elliot, you can confirm that, right? Elliot will be giving the workshop. So
yeah. There's good stuff if you're beginning, and there's good stuff if you're intermediate or advanced.
Yeah. So that will be fun. I remember last time, Ralph loops are not in our agenda of covering, but we did cover that in the last 30 minutes. And again, I feel like Ralph loops are one great example of, hey, something was a meme for like 3 days until everybody actually started taking it really seriously, right? And then the next week we're covering it in our workshop. So if you go to luma.com/@state of AI, so the @ state of AI, you will see our upcoming state of AI events as well. And again, context engineering is because, we were talking to Harald at Microsoft and he said, we should really do one on context engineering. We just did one on state of AI champions and there's plenty more. See, Votter, I don't know, I'm excited that we'll see you tomorrow as well at the workshop. But really, again, the things you all want to learn, the things you guys get excited about, like all you have to do, just like Squeaky said, is just talk to people, show up in the, the GitHub repo, show up in the comments, show up in,
talk to your agent
or whatever. Yeah. Talk to you. Exactly. Right. Like whatever you can do. Those are all the ways to help better the ecosystem and also help better get the information that, you want and that you need. And again, I mean, this is moving so fast. So, Sweeky and Ado, I do want to ask you guys, do you guys have any community forums that people should be aware of that they can hang out in? Or Discords or?
So we, at Anthropic, we do have a community Discord. Can join. Oh, sorry,
That's okay.
It seems to be having.
We can still hear you. Yeah.
So we do have a community Discord at anthropic.com/Discord. That's going to give you a direct link to join. And we have a community there, 50,000 plus developers sharing tips, tricks, and more ways to use Cloud Code. So I hope to see you there.
Amazing. And Squeaky, what about Microsoft probably has a lot too.
Yes, and this is something I should have asked Harald to share a little snippet with me, but just off the top of my head, we have a bunch of all of our VS Code YouTubes, the GitHub YouTube is a great space. Check out the videos, check out the content. There's events, sessions happening all the time, which is really great. I'd say go to the GitHub repos, see what's going on there. Discussions are pretty good in the GitHub repos itself. And I mean, that's what I would start. And that's what I'd suggest everyone go. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, very cool. And we do have an weekly AI podcast called The Context Window as well. So if you go to youtube.com/this.media, you should see that. Thank you all for coming. And all these folks are on the internet, so feel free to connect, including myself, Elliot, Sweeky, Ado, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.